What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, February 23rd, 2018. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And I apologize about being out tomorrow, but we've got 3 different flus floating around this island, and whatever I had yesterday basically was a 24-hour bug. I'm still a bit under the weather, but able to do the show. And, of course, in hour number 3, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us with her unique perspective on the world. So the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in with your comments and questions. And let's just get right into it right now. Let's see. Now, as you probably know, I'm hearing a replay of one of my shows in the background there, Mike. Can you check the pots? Okay, it's gone. Anyway, breaking story here. Apparently, a woman driving an SUV has rammed a security barrier at the White House, and they put the building on lockdown. The barrier wasn't breached. Nobody was hurt. They've arrested the woman. They're questioning her. The last report I saw, they're starting to think that maybe she just made a wrong turn and didn't realize that that was the gate into the White House, and just bumped into the security gate. So the news is covering that right now. Now, down in Florida, as you know, Florida, this high school in Parkland has become this focal point for yet another attempt by the liberals to ban or limit firearms by ordinary law-abiding citizens. And they've organized this student push for gun control. It's for the children, but the students are being picked for their political views. They're being encouraged by the news reporters as to what to say. And there are indications that a lot of the funding from this is coming from Hollywood liberals and from George Soros. But they're all protesting the AR-15. And their obsession with that gun is now becoming very obvious, because what they're not protesting is something that is worthy of protesting. And that is the fact that the FBI and the police ignored threats from this shooter that let it all happen. And that is really the issue. All the gun control laws in the world are not going to work if the existing laws are not being enforced. And the FBI was called on this kid. The police were called on the kid multiple times. He was sending pictures of his guns to people over social media and threatening them. And nothing was done, because they want to get the guns. They want to be able to say that the National Rifle Association are the murderers. No, they aren't. The murderers are the murderers. And again, the stunning hypocrisy of this idea that when a Muslim commits an act of terror, we shouldn't blame all Muslims, but when a gun person whose brain is melted on prescription antidepressants commits a mass shooting, all of a sudden they want to take everybody's guns away. It's very, very obvious there is a double standard here. So again, this Nicholas Cruz, 6 months before he went on this shooting down in Florida, or allegedly went on the shooting down in Florida, he was basically sending messages to a student that he was threatening to kill. And that was reported, and nothing was done. Now, do you remember that video that came on out about the darling of the gun grabber media, David Hogue, who's been used in the media before? He's used on CBS regarding another shooting out in California. There was a video of him flubbing his memorized lines and being coached by the cameraman. And YouTube took it down under the harassment and bullying rule, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because nobody was being harassed or bullied in it. But, of course, this being the age of the Internet, the video is now all over alternatives to YouTube, and we have linked to one of them from the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. And the headline that you click on the link is, "Breaking News Busted, YouTube Deleted, This David Hogue Being Coached Can't Remember His Lines." And if you click it, it'll go to an alternative video streaming site, and the video is up there. Now, the father of one of the shooting survivors has gone public, saying that CNN was seeking out political statements for the interview. And it's rather odd because just because somebody's gone through a traumatic incident does not make them an expert on political ideology overnight. But again, more indications this was all being covered up. Now, there was a student, Colton Habe, who was the student who first exposed CNN for pushing him to ask a scripted question during Wednesday night's town hall. And remember, earlier in the day, it came on out. There had been a rehearsal for the town hall. Well, if it's a town hall, you don't need a rehearsal. If it's a real, genuine town hall, you just sit there and you ask questions. But they had a rehearsal. And basically, Colton Habe was on Tucker Carlson saying that the producers were out there saying, this is what you're going to say. Stick to the script. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, Brandon Minoff, who's an 18-year-old survivor of the Florida school shooting, has basically slammed the media for the obvious politicalization in the aftermath of the incident, and saying their focus is on the gun. They're not even really talking about the 17 people who died. It's just their obsession with the AR-15 or assault weapons in general is very, very obvious at this point. And again, they seem to feel it's okay to punish law-abiding gun owners for one shooter's actions, or a few shooters' actions, all of whom were on most of whom were on prescription antidepressants, and oddly enough, most of them were Democrats as well. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Michael in San Jose. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I want to express an experience I had like what you had, and that was you saw Vince Foster being a wrong narrative. Well, I have, within the last year, seen something that's the wrong narrative about chemtrails, geoengineering.
Okay, chemtrails is a subject that we have already gone over many times on this program, and I really would appreciate people not calling on in and trying to take us off topic, which is what's going on here. So thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go. Very obvious effort to take us off topic. Not going to work. I refuse. There's been another article, this from News Wars, basically pointing out that Hollywood's hypocrisy on this whole matter is stunning. Everybody, all the celebs are out there saying, "Oh, this gun violence is terrible. This gun violence is terrible." But at the same time, they make all these movies, and the more recent movies are the more violent ones because people pay to go and see this stuff. So it's a little hypocritical for them to be out there saying, "Oh, we've got all this terrible violence." And while it certainly seems like the triggering event continues to be the pharmaceuticals, being raised in a culture of so much violence numbs people to its impact. And you've got the movies, you've got first-person shooter video games. Video games in general are very violent. People become numb to the idea of violence. A lot of people walk around thinking that it's actually no big deal to kill other people. And obviously, they need to learn that it is a big deal. Now, the head of the NRA has come on out and saying that the reason this shooting happened in Florida was the FBI dropped the ball. They were too busy trying to railroad Donald Trump to actually go on and respond to all these warnings they got about this kid. And it's the failure of school security and mental illness. And the mental illness is exacerbated by these prescription psychiatric drugs. But here's where the story starts to get a little bit weird. There was an armed deputy who was at that school and supposed to be a highly trained, a tactical expert. And according to videos, he just stayed outside the building while the shooting was going on for like 4 minutes. And a lot of people are saying this armed deputy stood by and allowed the Florida shooting to happen. One article came on out and basically said it sounds like he was ordered to stand down and let it happen. And people are very angry because this guy was making something like $75,000 a year to be an armed guard at the school. And when something happened, he basically stood down. He never fired a shot. And now he has resigned, and he's now entitled to a 33-year pension. Plus, if he was ordered to stand down, whatever little extra vigorish they're going to be handing him under the table here. Now, up in Ohio, Sheriff Richard Jones of Butler County published an open call on his Twitter page offering free conceal carry classes to any employee of any school in his county. And supposedly the response has been phenomenal. Everybody wants to sign on up. The teachers are tired of just being told, stab the shooter with scissors, which, believe it or not, is the official recommendation of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, 2 school districts near Dayton, Ohio, have started training a confidential team of teachers and staff to fire back at an active shooter. They're not just giving them guns. They're taking them on out to the tactical range, and they're getting them up on their proficiency. And Trump made an interesting comment in response to the armed guard not doing anything. He said the armed guard doesn't love those kids. The teachers love their kids. They become very emotionally attached to them. They are going to do what needs to be done here. But the bottom line here is that prohibition never works. They've been fighting the war on drugs for how many years? The nation is still flooded with drugs. Banning alcohol did not work, and banning guns won't either, because all it does is take the guns away from the law-abiding citizen. Remember, the socialist government of Venezuela completely banned private gun ownership in 2012. They now have the second highest murder rate in the world. Here in the United States, the cities with the strictest gun control laws have the highest rates of gun violence, Washington, D.C. being obviously a case in point. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve Elkins, welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I listened to Donald Trump's address today, and I started thinking about this, and I threw it by my wife, and I said, you can have all the background checks you want to see if you can find anything to say that this person's not trustworthy to have a weapon. But you got one little problem in the hospital system here. It's called the HIPAA Act. And if that's going to have to change, at least for the mental health issue of it, if you're serious about trying to stop people that are mentally ill from getting weapons, you would have to report that your patient is mentally ill and some kind of criteria to say that they would not be trustworthy and maybe a risk to themselves or others. So unless there's a change in HIPAA with mental illness, the physician will keep that to himself because it's a doctor-patient relationship. And so you can do all the background checks you want. It's not going to discover what should be discovered if the person is a liability. So that hasn't even been addressed. No politicians talked about it. But that's a problem you have. It's the HIPAA law with the mental illness because that is a doctor-patient relationship, and they don't have to turn it in.
Well, here's a problem. Okay, I don't want to start saying mental illness like that's going to solve the problem. First of all, we live in a country where the psychiatric industry, if you will, has declared almost all behavior a mental illness of one sort or another. In fact, they've declared that wanting to eat natural, healthy, organic food is a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. Now, I think people who want to eat organic aren't necessarily at risk of gun violence, and therefore I don't want to see them denied their Second Amendment rights over the fact that they refuse to eat at fast food restaurants. So we have to be very, very careful. But again, what we need to focus on is the very clear documented link between violence and self-harm and people who are either taking or withdrawing from prescription antidepressants. There is clearly a problem there. And I think if these medications were banned, we're going to see a lot of road rage and domestic violence and all that kind of stuff start to really go away. Now, of course, if the government wants to do another false flag shooting, they're going to go ahead and do a false flag shooting. And they're going to say, the kid was perfectly normal and healthy, but we've got to ban all the guns, blah, 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 blah.
No, I agree with you. There is a problem there because you're going to have some criteria to say, well, this is mental illness, but it's not a risk mental illness. But, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned about arming all these teachers. That's what the new thing is, I guess, now. Plus raising the age from 18 to 21, which I see a huge issue on that problem, is that you've got military, you can go in the military, you can vote at 18, but you're not going to be trustworthy enough to have a weapon. But, can you imagine this, arming your teachers in a school, and what if your teachers actually takes down one of the assassins who ends up being one of these false flag operatives? Isn't that going to be quite an interesting, somebody lying there with a mask on, and the FBI says, well, don't take the mask off. Don't take the mask off. Let's just remove the body, get it out of here, and nobody knows who that person is, but the teacher actually took down one of the assailants in the false flag event. Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be very, very interesting. Of course, they could just show up and shoot the teacher. I mean, we had that other story last week about a security guard in a church with a legally owned weapon, basically stopped a mass shooting event. And when the police showed up, they shot the security guard.
Yeah. And then they could offer up another body later on to say this is the person that was behind the mask.
Exactly.
I mean, they have a number of ways. If the FBI controls this investigation, they control the outcome and exactly what goes out to the mainstream media. So we know they can certainly do that. But I thought that was interesting. Wouldn't it be amazing if one of the false flag operatives was taken down? That would be interesting.
Well, the false flag operatives are always going to be some kind of a patsy who's drugged out of their mind and encouraged to do this by FBI informants. And we've seen this pattern in all these so-called terrorism arrests where they make a big headline, FBI foils terror plot, and then 6 months down the road in court, it comes on out that the FBI informants put this patsy up to it, and it gets thrown out of court as a clear case of entrapment. So there'll always be cutouts to isolate the FBI or the perpetrators of these false flags from the people actually carrying out the shooting itself. And as we saw at Columbine and Mandalay Bay, they're going to have multiple shooters in there, and they'll all get away except for the designated patsies who wind up dead.
Right. Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to go to Bob in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Okay, he dropped, so let's go to Jesse in Ohio. Aloha, Jesse. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just heard you mention Sheriff Jones. He's been in the news around here a lot lately.
Okay.
Anyway, well, I was calling. I was going to say that the sheriff down there in Florida that didn't go in and confront the shooter the other day, aren't we told that a cop's job is to go home safe? And in that aspect, wouldn't that cop have performed his job exceptionally well?
Well, that's not what the people at the school were paying him $75,000 a year to do. But you're absolutely right. The courts have continuously reaffirmed police are under no obligation to protect any individual from harm, which is why it's even more absurd to say that we can't carry firearms for personal protection.
Right. That was pretty much the point I was highlighting all day today with these people. I just thought that was an interesting thing that you're always told after they shoot somebody, well, they're scared, it's a stressful job. Their job's to go home safe and all this. Well, when a cop does go home safe, they throw a fit about it.
Well, again, if the police are not going to do anything about crime, then basically all they are roving gangs of pillagers. Writing gratuitous traffic tickets or engaging in civil forfeiture, at which point you have to say, are they really of any use to society anymore?
Well, sir, doesn't COPS stand for criminally organized police?
No, it stands for copper, because the uniforms on the bobbies in Britain had copper buttons on them at one time.
Okay. Well, have a good show, Mike. I'm on my way home from work, and I'll listen to you till I get home and have to go in and do stuff.
Okay, well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We've got another caller waiting on the line, but first we're going to take a few commercials here and get caught up on all of that stuff. So we'll be right back. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And if you would like to help Republic Broadcasting stay on the air, and folks, our need has never been greater. Okay? You want us to be here next month. Right? Next year. So if you can donate, please do. And the address to send a check or money order to is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to call on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And the network thanks you. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here now. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing okay. Doing better than I was yesterday.
I'm glad to hear it. Hey, Mike, in Fantasyland, if they take away all the guns, will they give us a lifetime supply of running sneakers? Because that's what you would be doing most of your life in this country, because it's so violent just due to human nature. We'd just be running with our sneakers on, just like they were running in France when the lorry was driving over 100 people. How did they stop them? That guy, he drove over 100, he killed 100 people. If all those people were packing, he wouldn't have got a quarter of the way through. So, and what about the guy in China? Remember the Uyghurs? The guy had a machete. He killed 100 people in a train station.
Yes.
Now, if they were packing, they would have been able to stop him before he went a quarter way through killing people. So it's not the gun. It's not a gun issue. It's a people issue. This country. I'm a gamer, but I can say the top games is always like violent shoot 'em ups and like Grand Theft Auto. I don't want to ban the games, but it's just like the parents stick their kids in front of these games. They stick them on Facebook and Twitter. They curse at each other, right, back and forth, make fun of each other. Kids hang themselves because they get bullied. It's the culture, man. When are people going to realize it's the culture? You got a declining empire, and it's just the culture's crap now.
Well, you're absolutely.
And you can't keep blaming guns.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Ordinary people are under tremendous pressure right now from the declining economy, the economic realities the government doesn't want to admit to. Plus, you have the added social pressures of all these illegal immigrants and MS-13 gangs coming on into this country, along with the refugees. And people are under tremendous stress here. And if the government had been ignoring all this stuff about making Israel a better place and worked on making this country a better place, people, if they're comfortable and happy, they tend not to be violent. And the idea of running shoes sounds really good until you get to be my age and you can't run as fast as the guy behind you with a machete. So we have to deal with this absurdity that we have a culture in which the courts say the police are under no obligation to protect you from violence, but you're not allowed to protect yourself with a firearm. That's how absurd this whole situation has become. And again, if you want to see the aftermath of all of this liberalism, just go to any of the cities that are under liberal control. And they have very tight gun laws and extreme violence and extreme crime and extreme deterioration, because socialism does not work and always evolves toward tyranny.
Yeah, and it's, Germany, France, Canada, they all have people getting sliced up with machetes by the refugees or driven over, and nobody can stop them because nobody has a weapon to stop them.
That's right.
But Mike, on the culture thing, it's movies too, Mike. Like the movies, there was nothing like the movies now, like back in up into the 50s. I mean, they had shoot 'em ups, but it's very violent now, the movies. And I'm not saying ban them because, but, you don't stick a 6-year-old kid in front of that stuff for hours. It's all he's got. It's ludicrous, Mike, but it's on the whole Western world though, Mike. Like it's not going to get better here. It's going to keep going and on and on and on and on. And
the movies and the games, they're desensitizing kids to the point where going out and killing somebody seems like something that's acceptable to do, something that should be easy to do. And of course, it isn't. You just gave me an idea. Maybe I can blame Grand Theft Auto for the theft of my Honda.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, I want to switch topics. Not that this is important with violent people, because that's what it is, violent people. But I want to switch to where the Russians have brought in the 2 brand new Su-57 fighters and the 4 Su-25s and the 4 Su-35s, along with an A-50U airborne early warning. So they're moving equipment in. you know?
Oh, yeah.
And there's a reason why they're bringing that stuff in now.
Yeah, it's going to be on before the end of the year. There's absolutely no question about that. And, I mean, again, without giving away any details, the military aviation over our heads has become just this constant dawn to dusk noise that we have to deal with.
Yeah, they wouldn't be bringing the Su-57, which is brand new, in. Plus, they got the S-400s already in there. So they're not bringing this stuff in to just basically test it only. It's being brought in there because
the U.S. is looking for a way to escalate the conflict. And the U.S. has already killed some Russian mercenaries. So, yeah, this thing is spiraling out of control. We have to take a break for commercials. Do you have any more for us, Dustin?
That's it, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks a lot. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phone lines and talk to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you're talking about these mental illness background checks.
Yes.
And if they take that to the extreme, the first thing they're going to do is go right in the VA database, and anybody that's got PTSD, they're going to be on the list.
Oh, they've already tried to do that. They've already tried to do that.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, and then from there they're going to talk. They're going to put out anybody that's had a counseling with a VA counselor about any kind of emotional problem, and then they're going to go to Medicare, and anybody that's had any emotional problems there or has any prescriptions for drugs for their nerves, they're going to be on the list, and then it's going to expand from there. And these people won't know they're on this list until they go do a background check, and then they can't buy one. It's just like the guys that have been convicted or have been arrested and maybe spent the night in jail for domestic violence. They can't go. I know of cases where guys take their guns into a pawn shop, get some money for the gun for a loan. They go back and pay the loan off, and they can't get their gun back because they have to do a background check to get their gun back. So, you never know how far this thing's going to go with these mental checks. And, the Soviet Union had this big thing. They had these sanatoriums. They put political prisoners in.
Yes.
And it could expand to that. So anyway, that's just my point here. So take care.
Yeah, and they're scapegoating the guns here. The goal is clearly disarmament of the people and removal of our Second Amendment rights because this government is afraid of the people. We've been pushed right to the brink. There's a lot of angry people out there. I mean, look at all the phone calls we get where people are saying, I'm tired of waiting. And so, yeah. And, of course, liberals have always wanted a gun ban. They drew this utopia where nobody but the government has guns. Of course, that's been tried before, too, and that was called Nazi Germany. Anything else, Al? Okay, then we're going to switch over.
Terry, thanks, Mike. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Nathan in Northern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
None.
Hello?
Walmart, you there?
Yes, I was having trouble hearing you.
Oh, you're coughing. Okay. I called Walmart next to the high school a few days ago, and I talked to one of the employees, and she told me that none of the students got into Walmart because they went on immediate lockdown. So my big question was, if Walmart is on lockdown, how did he get in there to go into Subway to buy a drink? Or if he was in Walmart at the time, lockdown means nobody gets in, nobody gets out. So how could he get out of Walmart to go walk down to McDonald's? And my basic impression is that the whole story is one big lie. I just don't believe any of it. So sorry about that.
Well, nothing to apologize for. I mean, these days I don't trust anything that's coming out of the government or the corporate media. We've been lied to so many times. You would have to be a naive idiot to just sit there and watch corporate media and say, "Oh yes, that's the way the world is working."
Yeah, I know. And there's one other flaw. Well, there's two. I mean, there's one gal being interviewed by CNN, and she said there was gunpowder all over the floor. Now you grew up with guns in New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's.
And I did a lot of hunting. I did a lot of hunting out here in Northern California when I was a kid. We're about the same age, but I don't remember seeing gunpowder on the grass or anything like that. I almost fell out the window laughing when she said there was gunpowder all over the floor. And she's serious. So that was what. Yes, and the last thing to say, and I'll get off. I know you got a lot of stuff to do, but the sheriff announced that he came into Building 12 with his gun in a case. He assembled the gun, whatever he had to do, and he went up 3 floors, shooting, and then he took off his backpack, and then he ditched the gun. He left it there. Later on, he's talking about victims, that there were 12 victims in the building. 2 of them were outside. 2 of them passed away in the hospital. And there was another victim over at Pine Island Road. So if he ditched the gun on the 3rd floor, how did he go shoot somebody over at Pine Island Road, which is about 200 to 500 feet away? It doesn't make any sense. So pardon me for being skeptical, but that's where I'm at. And I just thank you very much for letting me get it off my chest.
Well, no problem. No pardon is necessary. Again, we need to be skeptical. We have to be very skeptical of everything that we're being told. The agenda is obvious. They want to disarm the law-abiding citizens. Meanwhile, our government has been spending taxpayer dollars sending assault-style, military-style weapons to drug cartels in Mexico. That's how completely wacko it's become.
I know.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
I know.
Thank you for the phone call.
Thank you, Michael.
And we're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Al, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I sent you an email, and it's kind of a response to what Dustin in New Jersey was saying about Canada. I don't know where he got his I don't know where he got his facts or figures from, but the homicide rate in Canada is actually very, very low. And for instance, shooting in 2016 was 619, stabbing was 223, beating. All methods was 611.
Yes.
Shooting was 223. Stabbing was 175. Beating is 116. Hey, we're tough up here in Canada. So, if you look at this, these are government stats. If you look at the stats in the United States, I mean, it's huge. Total homicides for 2014 was almost 16,000. And you compare that to 600, we're like, you're 10 times the size of us as far as population. I mean, we're still not even close. But I mean, one senseless death is too many, in my personal opinion. And I think what Donald Trump suggested, which wasn't his idea, it's been brought up before about arming the teachers. I mean, I asked a few questions at work today. I said, listen, if your children were going to a school and you knew that some of those teachers had firearms on the premises in order to protect the children in case something happened, would you feel better? And you know what they all said? Yeah, I feel a lot better. So, it's not just in the United States. I mean, it's all over the world, except you have these idiots that, obviously they want to disarm everybody, but you get these idiots that just follow along with this stuff. They're just brainless, clueless puppets. They have no idea what they're talking about. They can't even reason this stuff out to the logical end, which is, you know what? Someone's going to look after your kid if something bad happens. And there'll probably be more than one in that whole school. So, you know what, Donald Trump, great idea. I hope it happens.
I hope it happens too. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. The shooters are going to stop going into the school knowing that they could be shot at themselves. We got to get rid of all these gun-free zones. We got to take down those gun-free zone signs, and we have to put up signs saying 1/3 of the people here are carrying concealed. You guess which ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think this nonsense will die right down. And not to mention, I don't think a lot of this stuff is organic because it's just so coincidental how this stuff happens.
Yes.
They always happen, at a place where there's no guns allowed. They're gun-free zones. A school. There's a lot of funny business going on down in the United States. There's a lot of funny business going on in a lot of countries. And I think that's what the real problem is. And I've said this before, and I think you have too. The only way to really solve these problems is to get rid of every single civil servant in that country. You're all fired. You'll never work for the government again and start all over. And it's not, a popularity contest. If you don't want the job, you're doing it. And you have to do it for 2 years or 4 years, whatever it is, like have some kind of, almost like, what do they call that? You guys have or not have anymore, but you had it.
The draft.
Where you have to go to the army. You have to draft. You have to draft people to work to be a civil servant. You have to spend 4 years of your life as a civil servant, giving something back, let's just say, to society. And, that's just the way it is. I mean, I don't see what harm it could do. I really don't. Well,
the harm could be that without proper vetting, you could draft some totally incompetent people, which we already have a plethora of in our government anyway. I'm a believer in meritocracy. And the people most able to do the job should get the job. The root of the problem is that the CIA's drug trade over the last, going back to Vietnam, has succeeded in corrupting the entire government. And that's really what it is. Washington, D.C. Is not the nation's capital. It's a crime scene.
Yeah. Well, look what's happening up in Canada. They want to legalize marijuana, and the federal government and the provincial governments will be the biggest drug dealers in this country. I mean, I hope it works out, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out the hard way, obviously. And I just can't understand how your country would allow, like a citizen of Canada in without really, really going through them.
Well, here's the problem. Our elections are rigged. Our election system is a global joke, and I'm rather alarmed that Trump shut down his Commission on Election Integrity.
He's a politician now, I guess. I can't begin to understand what he's going through. I really can't. I mean, maybe he's boxed in. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, thanks a lot, Mike.
Yeah, it could be they've got something on him, or they threatened his family, or they showed him the Kennedy assassination and said, you're going to do what we tell you to do. But we did not get the Donald Trump that we voted into office, overwhelming all of Hillary Clinton's election fraud. All right. Well, Al, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And our next caller is Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I heard you talking about earlier, the guns and mental illness. One of the things that keeps popping in my mind about all of this is, when we start disagreeing with the federal government, they could deem us all mentally ill, kind of like what they did in Russia, and they could stop, the guns, us having our guns, because we disagree with the official narrative and call us mentally ill. I don't think it would be far reach or a far stretch that some of these doctors or psychiatrists are in the arms of government. And that's one of my big concerns. Absolutely agree that people who have mental issues should not and probably not own a firearm, but I can see this being abused.
Yes, it can be abused. And it's not that far of a reach. I mean, they're already trying to sell this idea that anybody who disagrees with the government or shares conspiracy theories is working for the Russian Ministry of Propaganda. And that one didn't work the last time when the Washington Post did it. I think Americans have awakened to the reality that we are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. But in terms of the mental illness, there's people who are defined as mentally ill under our current system, but they're harmless. And they shouldn't have their guns taken away. But ultimately, complete disarmament is part of the U.S. liberal agenda. It's certainly part of George Soros' New World Order plan. It's certainly there in Agenda 30. They all want people disarmed so that they'll do what they're told to do.
Absolutely. I want to throw this quick one out at you. My girlfriend was run over by a car and she had died twice on the way to Hershey Medical Center. But she's not out calling for all cars to be banned because she was run over. I mean, it's that liberal logic that you keep talking about. I mean, they're tools. People kill people.
Yes.
Tools don't kill people unless somebody's behind the trigger. And this is, to me, this is a senseless debate. It's senseless in the point that it just doesn't make sense. You lock your door at night because you don't want anybody to, breaking through your door and stealing anything. That's the whole reason why we have borders. You have a firearm to defend yourself, not to an attack. It's all defensively, all defensive. But it's this whole argument, it's got me so riled up and so upset. And so it's just like, when are these people actually going to wake up to the point? And I'm talking about liberals. And I hate to say liberals because I don't really believe there's anything such Republican and Democrat. It's all government working against the United States people, we the people.
Well, liberalism, liberalism is actually, especially in the time of Hillary Clinton, it's become a cult, and they just believe what they want to believe. They're more dangerous than the Scientologists. And that's the real problem. They don't think things through. Somebody just comes out with an idea, universal disarmament. Oh, that sounds great. Let's get behind it. I have a cause I can feel good about. And it's very easy to drag them along in some of these crazy directions like gun control, transgenderism, because if it sounds good, it is good. And they're basically trying to create this fantasy world, and they get very upset at anybody who says, look, that fantasy world isn't real. And they get really upset about that.
We can strive for a utopia, but we will never have one. We're human beings.
That's exactly right.
Thing, called evil. Yep. I mean, you can't ban evil. Never can you ban evil. But, as I was always told growing up, there has to be more good in the world than there is evil. I don't see it right now, but I still believe that there is more good than there is evil. And I think we will come out on top of all of that.
Well, I would like to hope so. I mean, there is no guarantee of the long-term survival of the human race. I know it's fodder for science fiction books and movies that we ultimately destroy ourselves, including On the Beach, which talks about a huge nuclear war that simply toxifies the entire planet. We have the technology to do that today. Between the number of warheads Russia has and the United States has and China has, yeah. We could basically exterminate the surface of the earth. Anyway, Kevin, I got to let you go. We got to do another break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phone lines here. Cliff in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, thanks. First of all, you're the great communicator. We really appreciate your show.
Thank you.
Second is we need to stop being self-defeatist. People need to remember that the gun sales are up 30% since the fake flag in Florida.
Yes.
I have a friend that has a huge gun store in Terre Haute, Indiana, and SIG just came out with a new P365 concealed carry weapon, and you can't get your hands on it. It's a new release, but the backlog is tremendous.
That's what I'm hearing.
The reason for my call today.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying that's what I'm hearing from sources all across the country. Every time they pull one of these false flags and the liberals start screaming, guns are bad, everybody goes on out and buys guns because they're worried that there's going to be some kind of a new restriction.
Yes, and these are families with wives and young children. They also have a gun training academy in conjunction with the store. So it's people from across the spectrum. The reason I called today, you made a statement the other day that Claire, you'd hit a pothole and her back was in stress again.
Yes.
And you mentioned laser spine surgery. And I just felt like I had to call. I had a tremendous problem with my neck in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Sent them the Laser Spine Institute in Cincinnati, Ohio. Sent them an MRI, which they analyzed for free. I went and had the surgery. You come out with a Band-Aid and no pain and absolutely no problem with my neck. So I would invite y'all, if you need that kind of treatment, y'all come to Cincinnati. We've got a place for you to stay here while you're recovering.
Well, I appreciate that. And Cincinnati is a lovely city. We were there for the Choral Olympics some years ago. But Claire and I have been talking about the laser spine surgery. And there are places here on Oahu that will do it, and we'll take Medicare in our supplement. But Claire is resistant to the idea at this time. So that's on hold.
I was literally talking to customers on my cell phone an hour after I came out of the anesthesia. So if you ever need somebody to talk to, well, I'll send you an email to let you know how to get a hold of me. But if I can ever be any help, let me know.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for that story. And that goes into the file on the subject of this particular treatment.
All right. Very good, Mike. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. And we're going to start with Steve Elkins again. But, Steve, I'm probably going to have to take you to the station break. What is on your mind?
Well, you got some sharp people out there, sharp audience today, and it's a really kind gesture, that last caller from Indiana.
Yes.
That's the Hoosier State for you. They're good people there. Hey, your caller mentioned about the government determining us mental deviants if we disagree with their narrative, and I agree with that. They can always make a case out of that. And we also know that they're using the term right now. We use the term we're patriot, and they're turning that into a negative. But my question was, I'm just thinking about this whole shooting down Florida, and I was wondering, there's two things that just quite don't make sense to me. I think I even emailed them to you. But the Uber driver himself.
We're going to have to put you on hold. We got to do our station identification. Don't hang up. I'll come back to you, and you'll have all the time that you want to talk about this issue. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we're talking with Steve Elkins. And Steve, if you just pick up where you left off.
Just don't look right. Something seems kind of odd about it. But the Uber driver himself, I've never identified him, but, he picks up Nicholas Cruz. I guess Nicholas Cruz had a rifle in a case, throws it in the back seat, tells him, take me to the high school. And there's no red flags there by the Uber driver, which is kind of really odd. I mean, most people
thought the same thing.
Rocket science.
Yeah.
That's kind of very odd that nobody would be questioned on that. And you wouldn't suspect something really odd because it's quite hard to hide the rifle case. What are you going to tell somebody that is? It's a rifle case. It's quite obvious. And number 2 is, I would like to know if it wasn't done, he should have requested, or his family should have requested, or his attorney. But someone should have requested that Nicholas Cruz's hands been checked for powder residue, gunpowder residue.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to my next door neighbor, and I know that pistols put off gun residue, powder residue. I asked him what a rifle. He said even more so because your cartridge holds a lot more powder. So yes, there should have been some powder on his hands if he actually indeed shot the rifle. I would like to know for sure, after seeing that video that you're trying to scrub now on the internet, the young female talking about, she's talking to him and hearing gunfire in the background. He may have participated. I'd like to know for sure 100%. Does he have any gunpowder residue on his hands? I'd like to know that answer to that question.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that one. But again, it's not like we're going to be allowed to actually test his hands for GSR ourselves. It'll just be somebody in a uniform or a business suit that comes on out and says, oh, yes, he had gunpowder residue, gunshot residue all over his hands.
Right. Yeah, they can cover that up also. That's too bad, because if that had to be one of those witness type things, and it should be, that somebody actually has to witness and it has to be on his defense, I would like to know. To be honest, did he actually participate, or was he a true patsy? Because he does fit the perfect profile for a patsy with all the police runs to his home. He fits a perfect patsy. He's got some mental illness. He's on some medication. He fits a perfect patsy.
Absolutely. No question about it.
Hey, that's it, Michael. Won't bother you anymore. Great show.
Thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Mike. The idea of the gun control, they just keep nipping and nipping and nipping. But let's just say that perhaps guns get banned. Well, that makes us all criminals, because some people have to have a gun. Because if somebody breaks the door down, you can't be going for a knife in the kitchen. You're not going to make it.
Yes.
So I just have a sense that they're using, like the old saying, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, they just keep creating all of these crises for some reason. Look at the Patriot Act, after the planes hit the buildings. It's just, declaring us as, enemies, combatants and stuff like that. So, but I guess we're all going to have to be criminals because, you know, we're all going to be living in a socialistic, Marxist communism, you know, type of world with all of this programming going on. What do you think?
Yeah, well, that's certainly the direction the liberals want to take us in, and George Soros as well. Yeah, they want complete, total disarmament so that we, the people, will do what we're told to do. And somebody wrote in an email and asked me to remind everybody that the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is not about target shooting, and it's not about hunting. It is about the separate individual states maintaining civilian militia to make the central government mind its own business. That's what it's really about, standing up to tyranny, being able to stop tyranny. And again, go back and look at the history of gun bans through the 20th century or the history of genocide. Every population that was subjected to genocide were first disarmed.
Yeah. You almost got to wonder what are the other reasons behind it. Like, we're into so much debt now. I mean, are they anticipating some kind of a reset? And therefore, you know, they have to be able to get these bans in place, you know, in order for that to happen, because it's going to happen, or because they just won't stop spending. And I don't know, you just got to ponder on this stuff every day. But it looks like every day we're losing more and more liberty, and pretty soon you're not going to know what country. Look at Europe too. You know, I mean, what they did over there, the politicians with the borders. So they're not even going to exist. I wouldn't be surprised if the Vatican wouldn't be the capital of Islam within 20 years.
Well, let's go back to your first point you were making, because at this point, pretty much all of the economic experts are saying there is a major global correction coming. And obviously people are going to be hungry. There won't be food. The supply chains will break down. And that's why the government is justly afraid of what might happen. There could be an armed uprising. A big part of what led to the French Revolution was just the people were starving to death. And of course, they didn't have guns back then, but they still won the revolution. Okay, sounds like we're having some issues on our phone connection. So I'm going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. And let's go to James in Tokyo. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Ohayou gozaimasu.
Ohayou gozaimasu.
I'm sending you an article. I'm sending you an article right now. I called you a couple days ago. I said my friend who's a sheriff responded to the incident so that a video was made. And since that time, it has come out on CNN, on Fox News, on the Daily Mail, on the Sun Sentinel, which is the major paper in Broward County in Florida, as well as numerous TV stations, that the video was made. It was seen by many people, but there was one problem with the video. It was on some type of delay system, and there was only one shooting, and the perpetrator who did the shooting was the person that they arrested. So,
well, I'll certainly look at what you're sending me, but again, the idea of a delay that long on the system makes absolutely no sense to me. So already I'm skeptical and suspicious. And we have seen this government and the corporate media fake video evidence in the past. We've seen corporate media using green screens and all kinds of other things to manufacture the news. So I'll take a look at the video and I'll give you my best analysis of it.
Okay, and also, yeah, besides what I just sent you from the Florida paper, and within that there's also a video showing a news broadcast, but it's also been on CNN, Fox News, the Daily Mail, almost every publications here, you know, and there was just a problem with their video system, which was installed by the Broward Department of Education, and it got delayed. So the police thought that they were seeing it real time, and that's when they started sending the people over, and they realized when they got there that it was a delay. And so that's when they had to go out and search for the guy.
Well,
and the news station said that they saw it.
I'm looking at what you sent me. I'm looking at what you sent me, and this looks like the police making excuses for not having stopped the shooting, because they've come under severe criticism for not getting to this guy after all the threats. They've come under severe criticism for not going in and confronting the shooter. And so I'm looking at this. I'm seeing a talking head. I'm not seeing the video itself just yet. But I'll take a look at it over this next commercial break, okay?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, and let us move on to Bob in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you too, Mike. I've called in quite a few times. I'm a retired police officer from Pennsylvania. And what I saw happen in Florida with that deputy sheriff sitting there doing nothing, there's a thing called vicarious liability. And plus the police department also, if these people want to really start raising hell about guns and stuff, they really need to start going after these police departments and stuff that are sitting on their hands and doing nothing and watching this stuff go on. And if they start getting people to start suing the police departments over stuff like that and go after the personal cops themselves, because we had a problem in our department one time, and it ended up being the cop got sued himself because he took it upon himself to make his own decision outside the guidelines of the police department. He's sworn to uphold the law, the Constitution, and whatever rules and regulations they have in that county. And I am sure if a shooting's going on, it was his responsibility to take care of it. Whether he was scared or not, I don't know. But I would like to start seeing some lawsuits start flying, especially against some of these individual officers that don't want to do anything. And that's what I wanted to say, and I'll listen to it off air. Thank you very much, Mike. Great show.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob, here. And here is the problem. There have been attempts to sue the police for failing to protect people from violence. And one of the best-known cases actually occurred in Washington, D.C. Some years back, where there were these three women who shared a condo or apartment in Georgetown. And they were home invaded. And one of the women was taken prisoner and sexually assaulted. The other two women basically were upstairs listening to all this, and they called the police repeatedly. The perpetrator on the ground, our roommates being attacked, and nothing happened. And eventually it got quiet, and these two women figured maybe the perpetrators had left. So they went on down to check on the roommate. The perpetrators were still there, took them prisoner, and spent the rest of the night sexually assaulting them. And these three women sued the Washington, D.C. police, and they lost, because there is no law that obligates the police to protect people from violence. And I know that's a terrible thing. Most of us have an image of the police that we get from movies and TVs, that they're going to, launch on in and kill the bad guy, but they're under no obligation legally to do so. And there have been many of these lawsuits, and they all fail on that point, that the courts have ruled repeatedly the police are under no obligation to protect you from harm. Their job is writing traffic tickets or civil forfeiture. And again, the police don't show up when the crime is actually being committed. They show up afterwards and look like they're relevant. So that is a real serious shortcoming. And like I said, it is absurd to have a society where the police are not obligated to intervene to protect you from violence, and yet you are being forbidden to arm yourself to protect yourself from violence. That's a really messed up system. Okay, let's go to Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. In the name of the quote from Cicero, where he talked about the enemy within, here's something that a lot of people may not be aware of, even the guys in the gun culture. Do you know what the oldest firearm brand is in the United States?
Not off the top of my head, and being a black powder enthusiast, I should. Remington. Okay. Remington.
Been around since the 1800s. Now, if you think that about a company that really would have it together on putting together firearms, being that they've been around that long, and they were a very, very, very reliable brand for years and years and years,
yes,
you think they'd have it together when it comes to what? Quality control. But now, people look it up. Remington has just recently filed for bankruptcy. Okay, they were taken over by Freedom Group. This is an example of infiltration into a corporate structure. And my take on it, see, in the last several years, their products have been crap. They've come out with several new products, and they send them out the door without even testing them. You think that, of course, quality control, especially with firearms, and you have experience with this, Mike.
Yes.
That's one of the products you absolutely want the quality control there, because otherwise they might blow up on you, right? So check it out, folks. Remington just filed for bankruptcy. How does that happen? How does the quality control, how do they lose the quality control for products they've been making forever, and the guys have been buying them like crazy? In the last several years, their quality has went to the floor.
I remember
really,
there was a big stink over one of Remington's hunting rifles could accidentally discharge if it was hit or dropped. And again, you have to scratch your head about that. But this is something that we have been seeing in this country in many areas of enterprise, where there'll be a successful company that makes a quality product, and then they're acquired, and the new owners want to make profits. So they cut the quality, they cheapen, they lay off the quality control staff. They rely on the name brand to sell the product. Yes, especially when you're talking about firearms, there should be some testing and standards. But the new owners, Freedom Group, obviously they're more concerned with the profit. And because of the drop in quality, yes, Remington is filing for bankruptcy. Hewlett Packard almost went the same way.
Well, and I understand the profit idea. That could be a distraction there too. What if it's not about profit? What if it's about control? What if it's about destroying those protection devices from the inside? You see what I'm saying? I don't know that for sure, but it sure sounds fishy to me that the oldest firearm manufacturer in the United States starts making crap. That just doesn't make any sense.
Well, again, so anyway, resorting to Occam's razor, I think it really is just a case of a corporation coming on in, buying a company with a good brand name, and then cheapening the product and relying on that brand name to sell it.
Yeah, here's another example before I let you go real quick. The farmers. I don't know if you've seen this in the news about the farmers and the tractors and the high tech that goes into these. I mean, we're talking about the big rigs, the combines and all that. Or, they've got the technology wired up so that the farmers cannot even work on their own vehicles anymore, and you have to take it. They have to the dealer. Well, if they're in the middle of harvesting a crop and they miss a week because they have to take their tractor in, that could from pretty timing in farming is very, very important. So that's another example of corporate control to, and keep the small guy from being able to be self-reliant.
Yeah, we ran a story about that. I think it was last week, about this guy who has become a self-taught mechanic on farm equipment, and was able to actually get the special computer that you have to plug into the farm systems to diagnose what's wrong with them. But we're seeing a lot of people in this country starting to talk about new laws guaranteeing a right to repair, because you're absolutely right. Even in this stressed economy, even with all the damage it causes to the environment, corporations love that planned obsolescence idea. You buy a product, you use it for only a few years, then when it breaks, you just throw it away and you buy a new one. It's good for their profitability. It's not really good for consumers, because we're working hard and spending money over and over on the same thing time and time again.
And the other part of it that it destroys, or it attempts to destroy, is self-reliance, being able to fix it yourself, do it yourself. We're entrepreneurs is what we started out as in this country, and they're destroying that. Well, we all have to go back to the corporation for everything. It's ridiculous. I'll let it go with that. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to address the issue where someone called in and said that you can go in and file something against the police and try to sue a police officer themselves. On YouTube, there is a documentary called Proof, P-R-O-O-F, Proof Police Departments Are Corrupt, where an investigative team went and tried to do just what your caller said. And you can see in just a few minutes how it would be impossible to accomplish any attempt to file a complaint against any police officer. It's well laid out. It's accurate, and it explains clearly, and it goes all over the issue.
Okay, so that's proof police.
Yeah, corrupt.
Okay. I'll
And
get
the
that
other
up
thing
here.
is,
Yeah.
someone was talking about video games that incite violence.
Yes.
I was wondering if anyone had made a video game called False Flag or the Clintons, and you could have a video game that would address, like false flag related issues that, indirectly.
Unfortunately, computer games are something I'm not an expert at, other than flight simulators, and so we're going to have to find somebody else.
Well, my point was that you had a game called False.
Can you hold?
Sure.
All right, we'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Joe in California. And Joe, I think you had one more thing you wanted to add.
Yeah, what I was saying, that video explains how it would be nearly impossible for anyone to say anything negative about any of those, I don't know what you would call them, government employee labor union members that each is focused on protecting their own.
Yes.
And the other issue was the Second Amendment, and how every time there's an issue, you see there's an immediate attack on anyone who has a gun. And there's also on YouTube, there's a video called Is Gun Ownership a Right? By Prager University, PragerU. Is gun ownership a right? And it breaks down the Militia Act of 1792 or whatever, and it breaks it all down, and it clearly explains that the key issue based on the Second Amendment is the word infringed. If you look up the word infringed.
Yes.
And, and I think that the more you look back, the Constitution was put in place to protect even the smallest person, to give even the smallest person the same voice as the wealthiest person.
That is exactly how Jefferson set it up.
And you hear a lot of people saying our democracy, when it's not. It's a constitutional republic, and the democracy being different. And that was all
it's
I
a
wanted
constitutional republic with a democratically elected leadership, although that last part has clearly broken down.
Yeah, the difference being that democracy is where illegals can vote in an election, non-citizens. And a constitutional republic clearly states only the citizens of the nation can vote in an election.
Well, the liberals are basically, the liberals are letting the illegals vote by trying to get rid of all laws that require voter ID. They're saying that it's racist. But you need to show a license to drive a car. You need to show a license. You need to show ID to buy a gun.
I would say that somebody is paying or secretly controlling the liberals to move that agenda that they want forward, to bring in an outsider to disrupt the harmony and functionality of the constitutional republic. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's certainly, George Soros certainly fits that bill. Anyway, Joe, I want to get back and try and get some more news stories done before Claire joins the show here at the top of the hour. So thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And I'm going to take some time here to work on the stories because I'm way behind on my talking points, and there's some interesting things in there. Now, as you know, these students are all being recruited, marshaled, if you will, encouraged, bought and paid for, to go on out and have protests against guns. And apparently, some school administrators are saying enough is enough. And apparently a school superintendent near Houston said that his district plans to suspend any student who takes part in classroom walkouts as a form of protest over gun violence after the shooting down in Florida. Now, Texas, of course, is a very pro-gun state, but again, they're trying to use these children to emotionally motivate us to surrender our Second Amendment rights. And you'd better hang on to those guns as tight as you can here. Here's where it gets a little over the top and a little silly. Over in California, in Elk Grove, which is just south of Sacramento, have forced an historical society to cancel their Revolutionary War reenactment. You know about the reenactors, Revolution, Civil War, and all. They get on out there with their black powder guns, firing blanks at each other, and some fall down, and they just have a jolly old time. But apparently, the Elk Grove Historical Society was told by the Park District that their muskets cannot be used because of new gun laws, and suggested that they have the reenactment holding sticks. And the Historical Society said absolutely not, and they've canceled their event. But that is really over the top here. When was the last time you saw anybody hold up a store with a flintlock pistol? These are hobby guns. These are historical guns. Nobody actually uses these things to commit crimes. All right, getting into some of the political stuff here. Apparently, David Kramer, who's a former State Department official, longtime associate of John McCain, has invoked the Fifth Amendment to avoid testifying before the House Intelligence Committee regarding that largely discredited dossier on President Donald Trump. So, got something to hide there. Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying the Russophobia is completely out of control. And the deep state, or the liberals, or whatever you want to call them, are just pushing this. And Mueller's come out with more indictments, just trying to keep the focus on Trump and his campaign against a growing public demand that the Uranium One deal be looked into, the Clinton Foundation deal be looked into, all the dead bodies be looked into. And so all in lockstep, they're all saying, no, get Trump, get Trump, get Trump, get Trump. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I hunted down that Proof Police Departments Are Corrupt video. I've just now posted it to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. During the commercial break, I also looked at that article link that caller James sent me about this video, which supports the official story. And as I expected, it doesn't actually show the video. We're just supposed to take their word for it. So anyway, getting on back to the news here. As you know, Adam Schiff has been out there leading the charge, trying to claim that all of the dissent and conspiracy theories that are all over the net are caused by Russian bots. It's all a Russian plot to get the American people to not trust their government. Now, that's desperation on the cusp of madness. We don't need Russia to have lots of reasons to distrust this government. Saddam's nuclear weapons being a big one in and of itself here. Now, apparently, this is over at InfoWars, apparently these so-called Russian bots were actually pro-Hillary, and the money trail links back to leftist organizations. So that whole story is starting to break apart. Now, a little bit of good news in terms of delayed justice. Our government may be unwilling to look at the Clinton Foundation. It's hands off. They're scared. They're scared of the Clintons. They're scared of how angry the American people are going to be that such a gigantic fraud was allowed to happen. But apparently other governments are out there now looking at the possibility of legal action to have their donations returned on the basis that the donations did not serve the noble charitable purposes they were told were going to happen, like Haiti being a good example. So we might start seeing some cases in international court that'll finally call the Clintons on this mess they've created. Okay, let's see. All right, now, getting on over to the Uranium One case, as you know, there's this undercover FBI informant who has testified before Congress, and he's come under attack. An orchestrated, coordinated smear attack, and now his lawyer is demanding an inquiry from the Department of Justice for this attack. I don't think Sessions will go along with it. I think Sessions is no better than Loretta Lynch. He's not there to serve justice. He's there to protect the insiders. Now, here's where it starts getting a little bit of weird. House Resolution 4918, introduced by Representative Brad Schneider, Democrat of Illinois, identifies white supremacists and right-wing extremists as domestic terrorists. Now, he doesn't actually define what constitutes a white supremacist or a right-wing extremist. It's kind of a loosey-goosey, one-size-fits-all label to demonize people. I don't think anybody should be called a terrorist until they commit an act of terror. Exercising your First Amendment right to freedom of speech does not make you a criminal, at least not yet. Now, 2 weeks ago, there were warnings. There was going to be a false flag event in Syria blamed on Assad that would be used to justify an escalation by the United States military, and it looks like it happened. The White Helmets, who've already been discredited as not being the charitable group they are claiming Assad is using napalm on his own people. And they provided a video which I'm not sure that's napalm. It looks more like fireworks. But that seems to be the false flag event. And everybody's gearing up for another war. Apparently, the Syrian army has entered the Kurdish-held part of Aleppo. Turkey has struck a Syrian convoy entering Afrin. So this is getting serious. We're talking about war between Syria and Turkey. Article out of Blacklisted News. The two East Ghouta campaigns, one is for liberation, the other is to save the terrorists. And the Western propaganda is repeating its Save Aleppo campaign to save the terrorists in Ghouta. In the process, the Western aligned countries are making a joke out of the UN Security Council. There's no mention of this campaign of any Takfiri and no picture of any of the sectarian militants who daily kill random people. Another story coming on out from Sputnik News. There's an awful situation imposed by NATO and the allies in East Ghouta. Well, any place the U.S. goes on in to bring democracy gets turned into a heck hole. The U.S. is literally destroying the world. Look at Iraq before the U.S. went in. Look at it today. Look at Syria before the U.S. went in, and look at it today. Same with Afghanistan. Same with Libya. The U.S. is making war on the entire world. Now, Sergei Lavrov is coming on out there and saying that Russia can find no evidence that the U.S.-led coalition is actually targeting the Nusra Front militants. Still playing that little double game. We're here to get the terrorists. Oops, sorry, we bombed a power station. Our bad. Now, one of the things that was not covered during all of this Florida stuff is the fact that U.S.-backed forces killed somewhere between 200 to 300 Russian mercenary soldiers. Now, that is a major escalation. You're talking about direct conflict between Russians and Americans for the first time since Vietnam. Chinese Air Force is deploying advanced fighters to the border with India. I'm going to go through these a little bit faster here. Americans are leaving behind a scorched earth. The U.S. refuses to clean up carcinogenic waste at Azores base. And they've had basically over at Portugal, they have this island of Terceira for 75 years. The U.S. is scaling down its presence, which the locals are happy about, but they're demanding that it cleans up the toxic pollution scientists say is causing cancer. Washington, D.C. said, no, it's not a problem. Trump's ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, basically is now saying that uprooting the settlers could cause a civil war. Well, the settlers shouldn't have been there in the first place. Those settlements are illegal under international law. Israel allowed them to go on in and be settlers. And if kicking those settlers out starts a civil war, that's the price Israel is going to have to pay for making a bad decision in the first place. Now, the U.S. State Department has issued a new ultimatum on the Iran nuclear deal to our nation's ostensible major allies in Europe, demanding that Germany, Britain, and France commit themselves to altering the agreement along the lines demanded by President Donald Trump. Basically wants to add the long-range missiles, which were never on the table to begin with. The rest of the nations that signed the P5+1 are saying they're happy with the P5+1 the way it is. And so now Washington is trying to arm twist them to go back in and say, we're going to alter the bargain. I'm altering the bargain. Pray I don't alter it further. Darth Trump. Iran is still out there saying that they have no interest in nuclear weapons, and as far as they're concerned, there is no sunset clause in the P5+1 deal. It does not run on out. But the U.S. is threatening to unilaterally pull on out of it until Iran agrees to disarm their long-range missiles. It's incremental. Next, it'll be the medium-range missiles, then the short-range missiles, then the guns, then the pea-shooters. Now, there are some people in Iran who are saying they may pull out of the nuclear deal over Western banks' reluctance to do business. And apparently speaking in London, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has warned that the problems with the P5+1 nuclear deal are not just the U.S. trying to change terms and threatening to withdraw, but that the U.S. is already failing to abide by the deal in the first place. And many European countries have signed deals with Iran since the P5+1 deal, only to struggle to find banks willing to process it. The banks are concerned that the U.S. may impose sanctions on them. Pentagon is considering sending McMaster to possibly Afghanistan. And meanwhile, the White House has unveiled the largest ever set of sanctions on North Korea. So all that feel-good unity at the Olympics is already being thrown away. Apparently, Mike Pence didn't stand up during the ceremony where the host team comes onto the field. That's a tradition, because the host team consisted of both North and South Korean athletes marching together. And Pence was just doing his kneel act impression on that. And he makes himself look bad to the rest of the world, and he makes us look bad collectively here. Okay. North Korea brands the UN Secretary General a henchman of the United States. Certainly seems to be that way. Let's talk about a couple of things to our economy. Apparently, 20% of Greeks are now out of work. They're literally having to beg for bread from all the austerity. Walmart has announced they're putting even more robots in their stores. They're saying that the robots are to help staffers, not replace them. And if you believe that, you'll buy this watch. Article out of Investment Watch blog, Paris Then and Now, or the Reality of Multicultural Genocide. And it's talking about not just Paris, but all these capitals all over Europe that are already losing their cultural uniqueness from the flood of refugees. It's going to be harming tourism. There's so much violence going on. And if you want to spend the money to go see Paris, you want to see Paris. You don't want to see transplanted Africa or transplanted Middle East. They keep this up long enough, all of Europe is going to look exactly the same, a multicultural slum, and nobody's going to want to spend money to go see that. Now, apparently there's a dreamer group pushing for amnesty for 12 million illegals, which, again, they're illegal. And we don't have room for them. We don't have the infrastructure to support them. They're bankrupting states like California. And many of them have turned out to be MS-13 gang members. Now, about that 12 million illegals, I've been hearing that same exact number for almost a year. And yet we know more illegals are still pouring over that border, trying to get there before the wall is finished. So I'm starting to think that the actual number is much higher. Now, America's immigration agency has removed Nation of Immigrants from its mission statement, so maybe they're getting a little tired of all this nonsense, too. Now, back up in San Francisco, we've been talking about how this once beautiful city by the bay has just been trashed. Piles of used drug needles, urine, feces, trash everywhere. Such volume, apparently, the city can't keep up with it. And now, according to this article that came out of Fellowship of the Minds, there's an infectious disease expert saying that San Francisco has become as hazardous to health of people just walking around as the slums in India and Brazil. And those are pretty bad. Our nation is being trashed right before our very eyes here. Now, the new president of South Africa wants to seize land from white farmers without compensation. The new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has pledged to return the lands owned by white farmers since the 1600s to the black citizens of the country. Wealth redistribution. And the owners, the current legal owners of these farmlands, are not going to be paid for it. The government's just going to steal it. Now, here is the problem. They tried the same thing in Zimbabwe. They went out to the white-owned farms. They kicked the white people off. They put the black people on. The black people didn't know how to farm. They didn't know how to run the farming machinery, and Zimbabwe's economy went into a tailspin. They were walking around with paper notes that said $100 trillion. I still have a couple of them here that say, here we are, $10 billion. $10 billion. If only it were so. Now, here's an example of how liberals just jump at something. Apparently, there is this author, Rebecca Morris, and she was driving around one day. She's been on the New York Times bestseller list, apparently, and all of a sudden she saw a very strange flag on a flagpole, and she immediately calls up the Seattle Times reporter, Eric Lactus, saying, there's a Confederate flag in the neighborhood. You may want to do a story about that. They're flying the Confederate flag. So the reporter drives on over there and discovers it's actually the flag of Norway that the owner had put up in support of Norway during the Olympics. But this liberal just saw the colors and the bars and just jumped the gun. It's amazing. Okay, some quick science and health stories before Claire gets in here. Right now in this country, 1 million children under the age of 6 are now on psychiatric drugs. This is right out of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Everybody's on Soma. And these are dangerous medications. And these are very young, impressionable minds. What are these kids going to grow up to, having their brains scrambled at such a young age? Oregon is going to start having school exclusion day. Kids without all the appropriate approved vaccinations will not be allowed to attend school. I think the kids will actually think that's pretty cool here. Down in Australia, it's really getting out of control. Vaccine skepticism in Australia is now punishable by 10 years in jail. They passed a law that's aimed at Australian medical practitioners who are questioning vaccine safety. It's now illegal. 10 years in jail. Okay, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about this report that came on out that showed that this pro-transgender agenda is being financed in large part by the medical industry that wants to convince young people they're a different gender in order to sell them hormone treatments and surgeries and so forth. And it's not like the industry is really suffering right now because of social media, people wanting to be famous on social media. cosmetic surgery is a booming business right now. So here we have this story. This is over at John Rappaport. Basically, where the latest step in this is to declare transgenderism as an illness. If you are a woman trapped in a man's body, you are suffering an illness, and you have a right to medical treatment. And this is aimed at children, where if they can convince the child they want to switch their gender, the parents are blocked from interfering because the child has the right to choose the treatment. And parents who oppose it are illegally restricting their children. Here's where it gets kind of weird. You have to wait until you're 21 to buy a beer and a gun, but the government will let a child make a transgender change in elementary school. We have become a very, very sick society. There's no question about it. Okay. Speaking of social media, apparently Kylie Jenner, who's been a Snapchat user for since the beginning, is, along with many other Snapchat users, not happy with the latest version of the app. Kind of like what we went through when Skype forced us all to upgrade and the service went down. But basically, she came out with one tweet saying this is not working. It's so sad. And it knocked off 6.1% of its stock value overnight, which translates to more than $1 billion. So good for Kylie. Maybe corporations will start listening to what the people want instead of trying to jam stuff down our throat that they think we should have. Because I'm not happy about that at all. Now, if you're on 4G, and I am when I'm not near Wi-Fi, it turns out America's 4G network is ranked 62nd best in the world. We have poorer 4G than Macedonia does. Talk about our collapsing infrastructure here. And let's see, last year hackers stole more Social Security numbers than credit card numbers, and used those Social Security numbers to loot $16 billion. Cybercrime is a clear and present danger, and obviously the government has no interest whatsoever in doing anything about it, which raises the possibility, I think, that maybe the cyber criminals work for the NSA. They're certainly not out there catching any real terrorists here. For those of you who are fans of Richie Allen, YouTube has deleted his channel and banned him. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the Lady Claire after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who's feeling a little better today, I think.
I think so, yes.
Okay, good. And take it away.
Okay. And this, watching politicians is amazing sometimes. And this comes to us via Zero Hedge, which I have found to be a pretty straightforward blog. The FBI is corrupt and incompetent. Pelosi says give him a raise. And that's exactly, this is from the Congressional Department of We Can't Make This Up. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer have elevated the art, if you will, of chutzpah to just this whole new level. Now, this was not even 3 days after the FBI's malfeasance and incompetence in their mishandling of the Parkland, Florida massacre. These interesting pieces of work have the unmitigated gall to publicly ask for another $300 million to add to the FBI's budget.
Well, of course, the FBI was grossly negligent and mishandled the case only in the context of it being a genuine mass shooting, as opposed to yet another staged false flag.
Absolutely. And what is this money for? It's to combat, drumroll, ominous music here, Russian trolls. And this is just an amazing example of these people having a narrative prepped and scheduled to wrest control of the news cycle regardless of the optics. The goal is to create layer upon layer of fake news, repeat with fake, paid by George Soros outrage, and that is what Russiagate is all about.
Well, I think Russiagate is less Soros and more the deep state trying to find a scapegoat on which to blame the growing distrust by the American people for the government and the corporate media.
Yep.
And it's all a Russian plot. It's Vladimir Putin is trying to make the American people not trust us anymore.
Yes.
Which is nonsense, as I mentioned before. We don't need Russia to find reasons not to trust the corporate media or anything the federal government says.
Yeah.
ClimateGate, for example. Human-caused global warming.
Hello, yes.
Assad's sarin. Saddam's nuclear bomb.
Yes, and I was reading, and I couldn't help but laugh. It's a senator, U.S. senator, I believe, from Oklahoma, who was talking to NPR about what these Russian trolls and bots are trying to do. And I thought, okay, let's take a look at this guy and see what his background is. He has a bachelor's in speech and history, and he's got a master's in divinity from a Baptist institution of higher learning.
So he believes the Russian trolls are
It's
out there.
like, where the doggone heck is any credibility for any of these claims? Does this guy not understand in the 21st century, Mike, how easy it is to spoof an IP and make an email or a message on Twitter or whatever look like it's coming not from where it actually came from?
Again, Paul Craig Roberts hit it right on the head. This Russophobia is raging completely out of control.
Yeah.
And they're out there trying to dump the blame for everything that's gone wrong in this country on Vladimir Putin. And now, of course, we're starting to shoot Russians in Syria.
Yeah.
And they're heading toward a war, which we are going to lose. We will lose this war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate. I have family in the military, so it's very concerning to me. And yes, I get it. There has to be a strong display and capability for doing something militarily if there is no other way. But Mike, the problem to me is this government has forgotten and abandoned anything that used to approach intelligent, moral, hard-won negotiations in favor of the face of a gun or a bomb or a bullet.
Yes.
That's the only thing they seem to know how to do these days.
Well, it seems like our State Department, our foreign policy is little more than chest thumping.
Yeah.
And saying, you do what we tell you. That's America's foreign policy.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. is trying that with our allies in Europe.
On the Iranian issue.
The Iranian
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it saddens me. It's very disturbing. One of the other things that we need to look at, however, is that people in government are saying, oh, the economy is doing great. And yet, at the same time, people are drowning. The middle class is drowning in debt.
Yes.
And American consumers have a collective outstanding household debt of about $13.5 trillion with a T, of which nearly $1 trillion is the credit card debt alone. And households seem to be on a debt binge when they need to be on a debt reduction binge. And right the heck now.
We've been saying that.
Yeah.
Well, by now it may actually be too late.
Yeah.
This is something that we should have done a long time ago.
Right.
All right. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And the economy is not in great shape. The markets are being rigged. The unemployment numbers are being lied about.
Yep.
The way they calculate the rate of inflation, it's more cooking the books.
Yeah.
This country is in serious trouble. And I think that is a big motivation for why the U.S. is waging war on all these other countries across the globe, so that when the economy implodes, which seems imminent, they'll have somebody to blame for it. It's not our fault the economy's there. Look, it's the war. We've got to do. And because if the economy implodes and they don't have a villain to blame for it, like Vladimir Putin, we, the American people, are going to point the finger of blame where it richly deserves to go. And that's Wall Street and Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. They have been in terrible collusion on this. And speaking of war and possible coming war zones, apparently war preparations against Venezuela are coming up as their election nears. And this is an article reported by an organization. And if anyone out there listening knows someone who is a member, I think we'd like to have them on the show. It's called the Black Alliance for Peace, BAP. And it published a newsletter that reported news of an impending military assault on the sovereign nation of Venezuela by states and forces allied with the United States. Ajamu Baraka, the director, said the U.S. is concerned that President Maduro will still win the April 22nd election, which could mean 6 more years in office. And BAP urges people to include no war on Venezuela in actions. Well, it's a little too late. The 23rd is come and gone. For the 115th anniversary of the United States in Guantanamo Bay.
Now, the situation here is the U.S. has been waging covert war, economic war against Venezuela all the way back to Hugo Chavez.
Oh, yeah.
Because Venezuela was selling their oil for currencies other than the dollar.
Right.
And they were spending the money basically on the country and its people. And that sets a bad example for the rest of the nations on Earth who just need to get used to this idea of permanent austerity.
Yeah.
So the rich can have more.
Yeah. And I called it, I think pretty correctly, in an article on Tid's visit to Colombia a couple of weeks back.
Okay, you want to clear your throat?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, we're back up
that
here.
Plans were being discussed for regime change in Venezuela if Maduro is reelected. And the one thing I can tell you is that the U.S. government certainly wants to get its hands around Venezuela's vast oil reserves and ensure that the country only accepts the U.S. dollar as payment for that oil. So stay tuned. Now, there have been recent reports, we're going over to Asia now, by South Korean news media claiming that the U.S. will deploy attack drones to the Korean peninsula in the next couple of months. 12 attack drones that can target North Korea, leaders and military targets, will be deployed either next month or the following month. And the South Korean newspaper Chosun Ilbo usually gets this stuff reasonably straight. And according to the report, a hangar has already been constructed for the Gray Eagle drones. In addition, support facilities and personnel have already arrived at the U.S. base in Kunsan on the West Coast. The General Atomics MQ-1C Gray Eagle is an unmanned aircraft system developed by General Atomics Aeronautical Systems for the U.S. Army. It has an 18-yard wingspan. That's pretty impressive. And can conduct various missions, including attack, reconnaissance, surveillance, and infiltration. Its 248-mile range gives it enough reach to cover most of North Korean territory. Now, Mike, if in fact these reports are true, it looks to me as though North Korea is still in play.
Yes.
As a target for military action later this year.
But it's a dangerous gamble because I'm sure by now North Korea has dispersed its nuclear arsenal.
Yeah.
And we don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Nobody knows where it is.
Yeah.
They could shuffle it around on specially outfitted trains the way the Soviets used to do.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so apparently the U.S. government is willing to risk a nuclear attack here in Hawaii or along the West Coast just to get North Korea.
And you mentioned this a little earlier, but I'd like to add to it. The Treasury announces largest ever sanctions against North Korea. And they're sanctions aimed at disrupting the regime's shipping and trading companies. 27 entities and 28 vessels registered or flagged in North Korea, China, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Marshall Islands, Tanzania, Panama, and Comoros. And they made the statement that they are aggressively targeting all illicit avenues used by North Korea to evade sanctions, including taking deceptive action to block the vessels.
Decisive action to block them.
To block the vessels, and to make sure that nothing gets in. But I have to wonder, if this is something they're going to do, what's next? Are they going to start boarding and stopping ships that are allegedly
that's what they're talking about.
Mike, am I incorrect in understanding that doing this is an overt act of war?
It's an act of piracy under under maritime law. It would be an act of piracy. But yes, boarding the ship would be an act of war. But that's what the U.S. is clearly aiming for.
And interestingly enough, when things seem to be turning positive in terms of a North and South Korean détente at the Winter Olympics, today South Korea's President Moon Jae-in made the statement that Seoul cannot recognize North Korea as a nuclear state, and discussions with Pyongyang on denuclearization and better ties have to come together. And and so the two talks.
I think President Moon would be well advised to say, let's reunify and you share some of your nuclear weapons with the South.
Yeah, well, he didn't. But he said that they cannot acknowledge North Korea as a nuclear state. I wonder what pressure was put to bear, because before, when the U.S. was threatening, he was making noises about no attack on North Korea without our permission.
Yes.
This seems to be a 180-degree turn. I wonder what turned him.
Well, obviously more U.S. government arm twisting, like they're trying to do in Europe.
Yeah. And a couple of articles going back over to the Middle East. The IDF and U.S. troops are getting ready to drill for a massive missile attack on Israel. And these exercises will largely be performed on advanced computer simulations, although it will include some real-world activities. There are going to be about 4,500 soldiers from the two militaries taking part in the exercise, 2,500 of them from the U.S. state's European Command, EUCOM, and 2,000 from the Israeli Defense Forces. This is a lot larger than it was. This Juniper Cobra exercise is a lot larger than it was the last time it was done. And it's scheduled to begin on March 4th and will formally run until March 15th, although some American troops will stay in Israel and continue training with the IDF through the end of the month. And it's stated in this article, and it comes from Jerusalem Post, the threat from ballistic and guided missiles is one of the most significant threats facing Israel, and Israeli officials say it is growing. Okay, folks, one false flag to be blamed on either Lebanon's Hezbollah or Iran will kick off a major Mideast war with American troops already conveniently in place for the battle.
Oh, they make such good bullet stoppers for those poor Israelis, yes.
And note the timing of this exercise. It starts precisely when the AIPAC conference kicks off in D.C., which is 4 March to 6 March.
And Mike Pence is their keynote speaker.
Yeah. Now, folks, I do not believe that the timing of this exercise relative to the AIPAC convention is a coincidence. Because with Netanyahu expected to be indicted for corruption, he may well be moving heaven and earth to move the timing up for such a false flag, to distract from his legal woes and give him some bloody shirts to wave about at AIPAC as the justification for going into Lebanon, Iran, or perhaps both. Now, something else which is not getting any attention much in the U.S. press. This comes at a time when the U.S. State Department has announced that it will be moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem this May. The United States is going to be doing that. And Heather Neward said, "We are excited about taking this historical step and look forward with anticipation to the May opening." And that was stated by Heather Neward, who is an official spokesperson for the U.S. State Department. And why the timing?
Well, I think everybody...
Why the rush?
As you say, Netanyahu and corruption.
Yeah.
And I think the rush in general is the realization that ordinary people around the world have just about reached their breaking point. And they're ready to stand up and say, enough of this nonsense, enough about the threat of nuclear war, enough about Israel and Palestine. And, everyone's screaming about Russia influencing our internal politics. Nobody talks about, Israel. I mean, AIPAC is a celebration of Israel's control over our government.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be interesting. Apparently, also, the Trump administration says the 2001 AUMF, the authorization to use military force, authorizes endless war in Iraq, Syria. And there have been some new letters from the State and Defense Department laying out the case that this is perfectly comfortable. The 2002 AUMF for Iraq doesn't have any caveats. It just says Iraq is a threat, and that means that the U.S. can do whatever the heck they want to with it, or in Syria, where the U.S. troops are not only not invited, but the troops are there to advance a regime change in Damascus, which is a lot trickier.
Well, again, the State Department can issue all the letters that it wants to.
Yeah.
But all of these wars are illegal. There's been no congressional declaration of war as required by the Constitution.
They are also immoral and extra-constitutional.
Well, and there's no United Nations Security Council resolution in most of these cases as well. Now, something about that first authorization for the use of military force, the first one in 2001, when George Bush activated it, he said his letter of transmittal to Congress talking about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction at a time when he knew they didn't exist.
Right.
Okay. So Congress gave him the AUMF, but fraud negates consent. Like the Russian dossier and the FISA court, the authorization for the use of military force is based on a fraudulent claim.
Yeah. And what I've noticed when I've been observing today, President Trump has proven himself a far cry from candidate Trump, who suggested that these wars should be ended and gave us hope that the war party was maybe losing its influence in the bowels of power in D.C. Well, not so. And now he is expanding his war in Afghanistan. Wonderful.
Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires.
Yeah, you know.
And Putin's got to be laughing his head off.
Oh, I'm
the
sure.
The U.S. has walked into the same mess the former Soviet Union did in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And that's the reason they're having to continue doubling down. They can't win there. What they're doing is just going on pretending they haven't actually lost.
Right.
But the war has become totally pointless. Other than the oil and the opium.
Right.
Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back.
All right.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to Claire, a couple of things that are breaking on the news right now. Donald Trump has come on out basically condemning the actions of Russia, Iran, and Syria inside Syria, where Trump actually has no legitimate business being. And they're talking about this humanitarian disaster. Well, if the United States hadn't been trying to remove Bashar al-Assad, if they hadn't been trying regime change for the last 7 years, there would not be a humanitarian disaster. Everywhere the U.S. government intrudes, yes, there'll be a humanitarian disaster. Look at what's going on over in Yemen. Now, apparently, the U.S. Went to the UN Security Council to call for a 30-day pause in the conflict, and Russia vetoed it. So, of course, they're being demonized all over the corporate media. But the reason Russia vetoed it is because every other time the U.S. has called for a pause, the U.S. will use the pause to basically rearm the terrorist groups. And Russia and Syria are advancing and making great headway. There's no reason for them to stop.
Yep, absolutely. Another case that I thought something good happened on. A federal judge has refused to dismiss a lawsuit brought against CACI Premier Technology for its alleged involvement in Iraqi torture at the Abu Ghraib prison. And the statement was made by Leonie Brinkema. CACI personnel substantially aided the military personnel responsible for directly carrying out the abuses, including directing them on how to set the conditions of confinement, ordering them to employ various abusive tactics, and helping them conceal the abuses, she said. Moreover, upper-level management at CACI substantially aided these continued abuses by refusing to inform the military of reports that CACI and military personnel were abusing detainees, and by continuing to employ and even promote interrogators engaged in the abuses. Now, I say good on Judge Brinkema. Torture is counterproductive in terms of creating actionable intelligence and should be shunned by all civilized societies.
You know, the only thing torture gets you is a politically expedient confession. And that's what these people were being tortured. You know, tell us where that you've seen the weapons of mass destruction. And some of these people were tortured to death. And unfortunately, the military has never been held to account for this gross violation of human rights. But I'm glad that some of these private contractors are vulnerable to civil litigation. I think that's a good thing.
I do too. Bobbing over now to Saudi Arabia, apparently the U.S. may open the path for Saudi Arabia to acquire nuclear weapons. Isn't that fun?
Oh, yes.
Saudi Arabia is moving swiftly to become the next country in the Middle East with nuclear power. The kingdom is on the verge of striking a deal with the U.S. for the purchase of nuclear reactors, in spite concerns over its refusal to accept stringent restrictions against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto ruler of the country, has ambitious plans to diversify the country's energy source and is in the market to purchase nuclear power reactors. The potential for lucrative deals is too good to be missed, and the Trump administration is thought to be mulling over loosening U.S. law to win Saudi contracts worth billions. The kingdom has refused to be bound by stringent U.S. regulations that restrict reprocessing and enriching uranium for the production of nuclear weapons.
Well, we can see where this is going.
Yeah. And so, President Trump, I have a word for you, please. You need to take a look at the long-term consequences of such a move. Now, if in fact the U.S. wants to sell nuclear reactors here, just please make sure that they are the kind which produce no materials which can be reprocessed and create enriched uranium for the production of nuclear weapons. Thorium reactors, for example, are clean energy reactors which won't. Well, okay. And you have to know where the next evolution of such a process will go if you don't do this. The creation of a nuclear-armed Saudi Arabia. And President Trump, I'd like to remind you politely, Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy obeying Sharia law and has no constitution whatsoever. And against whom in the region would they use such weapons? Perhaps Iran, their existential enemy, or perhaps against Israel. Yes, I know you like the guy, and he's become one of your BFFs in the Middle East. But President Trump, I need to ask you a very important question. What moves has this prince made toward turning the monarchy into at least a constitutional monarchy? The short answer is zip, nada, none. Now, this will probably generate an arms race in the Middle East like nothing we've ever seen, sprouting MAD capabilities, mutually assured destruction, in countries like, wait for it, perhaps Bahrain, whose government views on human rights is just to the right of those of Attila the Hun, and whose repressive government, monarchy, and Supreme Court have just formally obliterated all opposition to the ruling party.
Okay, we're going to have to take another break for commercials here.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come on back, I have a comment about this and a lesson from history.
All right.
So we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'd like to share a little bit of history for President Trump and his advisors, who apparently are going to start selling these nuclear reactors to Saudi Arabia, because if they don't, Saudi Arabia will buy them from China or Russia, which is where Iran gets their power stations. Back when the Shah of Iran was still running Iran for the benefit of British and American oil companies, that's when Iran started getting into nuclear power in a big way. And he was held aloft, as this champion of nuclearization and nuclear power. There were newspaper ads featuring the Shah saying, yes, nuclear power is a great thing here. And then, of course, in 1979, the Iranian people got sick and tired of their U.S. puppet, and they gave him the whole heave-ho. Well, so let's say that we sell these reactors to Saudi Arabia, and everything is going along hunky-dory. Saudi Arabia starts building nuclear weapons, which they're clearly intending to do by refusing to accept the restrictions on reprocessing. What happens if the Saudi royal family falls? If there's a revolution there, and the government that's coming on in is radical and hates the United States and hates Israel, what's going to happen then? This is a very irresponsible decision to be making. And again, it's increasing the possibility of nuclear arms exchange, all for the sake of a couple of $1 billion in profits.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to take a look again at Asia and China and North Korea. How do you think China is going to respond to these new sanctions against North Korea? Just ignore them?
It's hard to say right now because of the trade war with China. I don't think China is feeling very beholden to the United States right now. And we might actually find China bring their One Belt, One Road down to North Korea, not South Korea, and basically start trading with them. And I think the rest of the world is definitely getting fed up with all these sanctions because they punish the wrong people. Ordinary people feel the pain of sanctions. The rich just grab more wealth for themselves. And so I would not be surprised to find that there are going to be countries out there who are going to ignore the sanctions and just tell the U.S., we're sick and tired of all this meddling, and you throwing your weight around.
Yeah. It will be very interesting. Apparently, Ivanka Trump is traveling to Korea for the end of the games.
Yes.
And will be sitting apparently very closely to a high-ranking North Korean general. I have to wonder if there's going to be a conversation and what that conversation might be.
There very well might be. I mean, it's obvious that the real reason Mike Pence went over to the Olympics was to hold high-level meetings with the government of South Korea, which probably involved the arm twisting to get Moon Jae-in to basically go back to mongering war with North Korea. They could very easily have threatened sanctions against South Korea. Now, South Korea is a manufacturing power. They make a lot of electronics. They make cars. And obviously the threat of some kind of a sanction or boycotting would be a very powerful motivation for Moon Jae-in to play ball with the U.S. government.
Yeah. I would tend to agree with you. But Mike, let's get back to domestic issues. What do you think the ultimate outcome of this screaming for this gun control is going to be? And what is the intelligent way to resist it?
Well, first of all, the real world outcome for all of these false flag shootings is gun sales go through the roof. And as a matter of fact, this might actually save Remington's bacon. Because with Trump in office and everybody thinking he's pro-gun, people actually slowed down buying guns. But every time the liberals start screaming about gun control, gun sales go right through the roof. I had a caller into the show earlier saying that SIG has come out with a new handgun, a concealable handgun. The backlog is horrendous. They can't get them in the store, can't keep them in the stores long enough. So that could actually, Remington could actually go back to their creditors and say, look, we're going to have a surge in business here. And so that's generally what happens. Every time they talk about grabbing the guns, more people buy guns. The ultimate aim of all of this, of course, is they want to find a way to get us to peacefully surrender our weapons, because the government, I'm sure, is convinced that if they try a forcible confiscation, that will trigger a civil war in this country. And it probably will. And so they're trying to use these school shootings, mall shootings, Mandalay Bay, and now they're using the children. Oh, how could you resist the children? They're such cute little cherubic faces, to try and get Americans to say, okay, we'll give up the Second Amendment. I don't think it's getting a lot of traction. They've been doing the hard sell on it all week long on corporate media and just pushing it as hard as they can. I don't think they're getting the traction.
It reminds me of a medieval story, and it's very difficult to know if this was true or not, but that European children were being rounded up because of their purity and their innocence to go to Jerusalem and fight in the Crusades. Literally.
Children's Crusade.
Children's
Except
Crusade.
they never actually got there.
No.
They got sold into slavery by the people who recruited them. And
what about this young man who told the world, essentially, and I found this again on Zero Hedge, that CNN had handed him a complete script, which was completely opposite what he wanted to say.
Yes.
And why he wouldn't go back.
And he's identified the producer who was saying, you will do this script. And, of course, the whole point of a town hall meeting is it's ordinary people getting up there and saying their true feelings. But we knew that this was going to be messed up when we heard that CNN had actually conducted a rehearsal for the town hall earlier in the day.
How do you conduct a rehearsal if you're going to have a free exchange of ideas?
Well, obviously you're not.
Yeah,
And we've had quite a few people who've now come on out and said that, yes, they were told what to say. And more than that, apparently only children, only people who were liberal Democrats or anti-gunners were even allowed into the town hall meeting to begin with. And even so, a lot of those people said, no, the issue is not the guns. It's mental illness. And we should be focusing more on the victims of this.
Yes.
We should be focusing on why the FBI ignored so many warnings about this guy.
Oh, man. They were just legion. They were legion.
And well, they were either negligent or they were behind it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the binary solution for this whole thing. People should be upset about this armed deputy who was caught on video just sitting there for 4 minutes, not going in while the shooting was going on.
Do you think he was told to stand down?
That certainly seems reasonable because he was basically held up as this tactical expert and really good at situations like this. He's now announced his resignation. He qualifies for a 33-year pension, apparently.
Whoa.
Plus whatever he was paid to stand down, I'm sure is sitting somewhere in a bank in the Cayman Islands by now.
How do people in the process of doing a background check for drug use that has a history, and it's perfectly legal, in fact, it's prescribed by the doctors, of these SSRIs?
Well, we know that this kid definitely was on these medications. That's already been admitted to. I know that in some states, when you're filling out the form to get a gun permit, there's actually a line item question. Are you on prescription antidepressants? And if you tick that off, yes, you don't get your gun. And now I'm all for the Second Amendment, but I think in the case of these clearly dangerous medications that are making people irresponsible, driving them to violence, I think it's an either-or situation. You can have the meds or you can have the guns.
Yeah.
And as you know, I had a bad experience with these meds when I was very young. I will never touch them again.
Yeah. They can really hurt people and cause those people to hurt other people en masse.
Well, it's a continuum. We've seen domestic violence increase. We've seen road rage increase. We've seen police shootings of innocent people increase. And they seem to be driven to act impulsively by these medications. And there should be somebody should make a big stink about it. Congress actually did at one time hold hearings about the links between prescription antidepressants and violence, but ended up deciding we don't need to do anything about it because those wonderful pharmaceutical corporations are such great campaign donors every election season.
Absolutely. What do you see, Mike, in terms of a potential to try to sell a return to the draft in this country?
That is going to cause a lot of problems. And I'm wondering where the U.S. is getting all these military that they're sending all over the world. Are they all contract mercenaries?
Yeah.
But I think if they came on out and announced a military draft, they would have to wait for a really big war to already be underway and then say it's necessary. And even then, I think Americans are just going to stand up like we did during Vietnam and say, no more of this.
Yeah. Because it looks as though I'm seeing this big push in the Middle East.
Yes.
I'm seeing this big push against Russia to combine both sanctions and demonization. And when you pull back and you look at the big picture, those two elements are a prelude to a war against the country on the receiving end.
Yeah, very much so. It's a standard pattern. Right now, U.S. military are stationed in 3/4 of all the nations on planet Earth, which means there are some of these people in countries we don't know about. Remember what a surprise it was when those 4 Americans got killed in Niger? And everybody said, I didn't even know we were in Niger. And so the scale of this is truly huge. And again, looking at the poor performance of America's weapons, and looking at the poor performance of our recruits, where they're having to lower the standards to get people come on in, and now they're saying, yes, we welcome the transgenders to come on in, and I don't know what that's going to do to military morale and discipline, but it almost feels like the U.S. is getting desperate to get this thing over and done with, because it's dragged on so long.
Yeah.
If you remember that original blueprint that General Wesley Clark leaked,
Yes.
this was all supposed to be over and done with by 2008, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, and we're still stuck in Afghanistan. We're still stuck in Libya. We're still stuck in Syria.
Yeah.
And our stockpiles are drawn down. Our military vehicles are worn out.
Mm-hmm.
The new ones coming on out, major problems with it. They're going to scrap the Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships and go back to the drawing board, because apparently this modularized configuration weapon system, they can't get it to work. Remember we saw that show where they were out there on sea trials for one of these littoral combat ships?
And how much do those cost, Michael?
They're about $1 billion.
Whoa.
Remember the last day of the sea trials, they had to stay tied up to the dock.
Ah, okay.
You know, and they basically swung the gun out and fired out into the ocean. And,
wow.
Yep, we're ready to go here. And you look at the state of the military. There was that commander was caught walking around drunk and naked in Okinawa.
Ouch.
You've got these 60 admirals caught up in the Fat Leonard bribery scandal.
Yeah.
Our military, for all the money that's poured in there, it's not in very good shape. We're not getting the bang for the buck.
And the Chinese are, and the Russians are,
Yes.
but we're not. And I think what has to happen, and this is probably going to sound very controversial to a lot of people, not the workers, but the heads of these military industrial companies, if they put out product that is shoddy, so late as to be antiquated by the time it's in the field, and just does not work, I think some hard jail time is not a bad thing. I mean, it's a form of treason against this country. As extreme as that sounds, not giving the U.S. the best that they possibly could, to me, is a form of treason against this country. And unless and until that corporate culture of the military-industrial complex starts to change, I don't think we have a chance in HE-double hockey sticks of really being able to confront these people we're being told are our enemies, like Russia and China.
Well, I'm a big boy. I can pick my enemies for myself. And Russia's not on the list.
No.
China's not on the list.
Iran's
Syria's
not.
not on the list. Iran's not. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes on down to.
Yeah.
The American people need to decide for themselves who is really our enemy. From whence does all the suffering and hardship we are experiencing coming from?
Yeah.
And it's not from Russia, and it's not from China, and it's not from Iran. And this insane rush to war, our Defense Department, I think, is just caught up on this myth that we've never lost a war and we never will. Of course, we lost in Vietnam, and we didn't exactly win in Korea either.
No.
And that may be part of the reason we're going to finish the Korean War, with victory. But
I would call that magical thinking.
I would call it magical thinking. And my next question is, how many people inside the establishment, Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon, are on prescription antidepressants, because the quality of thinking that is coming out is not encouraging?
Yeah, you're right. I wonder what that percentage is. And it's probably a lot of them, probably in step with the rest of the United States, that rather than going for some information on maybe some herbal or supplement alternatives to this stuff, are taking it. What is the percentage of Americans in general taking this SSRI kind of medication?
About 1/4, with police taking more than. You saw the article. There's 1 million kids under the age of 6 that are already on these medications here in the U.S.
How do you do that to a toddler? I don't understand
because
this.
It makes money, and things that make money are good. Do you know that there's actually a pharmacy right inside the Capitol building?
Mm-hmm.
So they can go down and get their dope whenever they feel like it.
Wow.
And some of the things that have come out of the mouths of people like Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters, you have to wonder, they're either taking way too many of these pills or
not enough. I hear you.
By the way, speaking of Maxine Waters, this came on out. She actually does have a residence in the district she represents, but she doesn't live there. She's got a $4.5 million mansion, gated, walled.
Yeah, of course.
That's outside her district. She doesn't actually live in the district that she represents.
Yeah, she and Pelosi have been sounding as though maybe there need to be some Democratic challengers in those districts, and soon.
Well, we got to fix the election system first, because, and this is a warning to Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
We all worked really hard to overcome massive election fraud in 2016, more to keep Hillary out than put Trump in.
Yeah.
And those same vote riggers are going to come back twice as hard in 2020. In fact, they're going to be going crazy this November.
Yeah. With the midterms.
Yeah, along with all the millions of illegal immigrants. And I think that 12 million that we keep hearing over and over and over again is actually an understatement.
It's a conservative number.
We don't really know.
Yeah.
We don't really know.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break for a commercial. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our Pauhana Friday presentation. And Claire, what do you want to talk about now?
I'd like to talk about the dreamers and my perception here. If they were infants, kids, they didn't come of their own accord. Okay. Mom and dad took them.
Yes.
But at the same token, we need to understand that the situation in this country is very different than when the Statue of Liberty was commissioned, and that beautiful phrase from Emma Lazarus, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." That's not 21st century America.
No, it isn't. We're overcrowded. The infrastructure is not keeping up with the illegals. And I hate to be harsh about it, but mom and dad and the baby shouldn't have been allowed through the border in the first place, or once they were detected, immediately sent back.
Yeah.
Previous administrations have helped create this problem. And now we're all supposed to be willing to share our home with these dreamers who are basically of adult age in many cases, because of something that happened outside of our control. And again, there is a legal path to citizenship in this country. And for those who come through that legal path, welcome. I hope we're not too bad a disappointment. But this unrestrained flow of bodies across our borders, look what it's doing out to California. Look what it did to San Francisco.
Oh, and that's my hometown. I weep when I get this mental image of how bad that place looks right now. And I have a slight, maybe difference of opinion from you with the dreamers. They should, and especially if they're skilled, capable, doing good work, and are able to work, I think there should be a pathway for them to stay if they are contributing. But I think that needs to be judged. If we had
full employment for all the legal American citizens, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
But we don't.
I know.
We have somewhere between 90 and 100 million legal American citizens willing and able to work. CNN reported on this. This isn't some crazy conspiracy theory. But 90 and 100 million Americans who have not been able to find a job for months, if not years. And our government has no business opening the borders until all of these Americans who want a job have one. And our government has no business sending all this money over to other countries like Israel, as long as you have Americans living in tents or sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash bins.
Especially our vets.
Yes.
Especially our vets. I get very testy on that, but
the refugees are being treated better than our veterans. Our veterans served the country. They did something useful.
Yeah.
Many cases, the refugees don't. They can't. They lack training. We know that the flood of illegals has turned MS-13 into a major problem.
It's a cartel.
In 22 states.
It's a cartel by this point.
They deal drugs. They commit vicious murders. They're now in 22 states.
Yeah. And that pains me. But again, getting back to the dreamers, I do think that those who have done well and have shown promise need a pathway for citizenship that is moral and right and good. Again, if they are educated, if they've gone for further education, I think that there should be that, and I think we need to take a lot better care of our vets. They have earned it.
They've definitely earned it.
Yeah.
Again, we don't have the jobs for the American people.
I know.
And I'm sorry. One thing I do agree with Donald Trump, putting America first. There's the music. Time for Claire and I to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the weekend. Have a really good weekend. Stay tuned to John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.